Hello everybody, National Master Shanley here with another part of our series of how to make a strategy for beginners. Today is our fifth part of our very long series to come in which I'll be teaching you the different parts of a strategy that will help overcome your paralysis and your inability to create plans in the middle game for both white and for black. Today we have this very simple position in front of us compared to what we usually have. And that's because today's topic is about pawn breaks. What are pawn breaks? Under here, you can see that pawn breaks are basically a pawn push that strives to break an opponent's pawn chain. And this is very, very, very strong, as by breaking opponent's pawn chain, you can obviously try to attack the weaknesses that come from it. Now you guys can click the videos above if you guys haven't watched the two-part series in our strategy series about how to take advantage of long-term and short-term weaknesses. Now, as you can see in this episode here, if you guys have played white e4 before, you guys have probably come upon the French defense. Now, the French defense begins with e4. Your opponent plays e6, which is the beginning of the French defense, d4, d5, and e5. And so, if you're playing on the black side here, the plan should be very, 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 very simple. If you do not follow this plan, then obviously, first of all, you don't know what you're playing, you don't know what you're doing as a black, and also you'll get into a very uncomfortable position. The reason for this is simple. As we learned in the space episode of how to make a strategy, you can see that white has more space heading this way, and therefore white should be attacking over here. He has more space in the center. Not only that, he has more space on the king side as well. If black does absolutely nothing, as you know, white will just completely dominate the game, and there won't be much that black can do for counterplay. However, as we know, since white is attacking on this side and this side, what black should do is counter on the other side over here. So, what we're going to do is we're going to try to undermine, try to take advantage of the very strong center white has here. As you can see, if white ever gets his pawn to c3, he'll have this magnificent pawn chain that will be very hard to undermine. This is where pawn breaks come in place and is one of the fundamental plans that most people will do when they're trying to make one. So in this position, black is kind of forced to play one move. If you play a move like knight c6, you're basically lost in this position. The reason why is because this pawn chain, as I said before, is extremely strong, and there's not really a way to take advantage of this. Therefore, c5 is the only move and should be the only move that you guys should think about, with a very simple plan of taking on d4, disrupting, and making this pawn on e5 extremely, extremely weak. Now, a strong white player will play c3 because this solidifies his pawn chain and makes this very, very, very strong. And so the game plan for this entire game for black will be essentially to take advantage of this d4 pawn. Now, before we get there, I want you guys to pause the videos here and try to think about where you want to put this knight over here, this queen over here, this knight over here, and potentially where this bishop in the future. I also want you to potentially think about what these two pawns are going to be doing in the future as well, in order to help you out with your plan of doing a pawn break in the center. So, I hope you guys pause your videos, or if you guys are just here to learn, here's where I would put these pieces. This knight has a very obvious square of c6. The reason why is because it attacks d4 and puts pressure on this pawn. Where this queen wants to go is probably b6, where it can also put pressure on this d4 square. This this knight will be coming here with the idea of going to f5, and this bishop will potentially stay on this diagonal, so if they ever capture us, we can capture back and have a very strong diagonal over here. So this makes quite a bit of sense. However, if white is playing properly, which as you can see he already is, he'll be able to defend this d4 pawn quite a bit. As you can see, he has quite a bit of defenders here. As you can see, this can come there, this knight can defend there, and this bishop can potentially go there. So what will black do if after all his time, white just defends properly? So let's see. After there, we'll play knight c6, carrying out our plan of attacking d4. Let's say he plays knight there. If we could, we would want this bishop to be over here to pin the knight to the queen and remove the defender at d4, but unfortunately in the French defense, as you already know, this is our greatest weakness. We have a weak bishop on c8 that will probably never ever get to see play due to the pawn chain that we have over here. So after this, we play queen b6, very simple, trying to take advantage of this diagonal. If white ever captures us, these positions are never good because as you can see, not only do we have a strong battery over here, but this pawn is very weak, and if we can potentially play moves like this, play queen c7, this pawn is not long for this world. So, capturing is not an option. So therefore, let's say he plays bishop e2, keeping up this, keeping up the defense over here, and then we play knight e7 with the same idea as before. We want to move the knight here to attack on d4. Let's say our opponent haphazardly castles here, which is a mistake. Why is this a mistake? I want you guys to help me figure it out. Alright, I hope you guys thought of this to capture, and a knight over here, with the idea of just capturing this pawn. And how does white defend it? We have 3 attackers, and there's only 2 defenders here. Now, bishop e3 does not work, in case you guys were wondering, because queen takes b2. This pawn is awfully weak in these variations. So white cannot just castle here. So what white should probably do is do something about, well, this pawn. You have a couple options. You could capture here, and because this bishop is being blocked right now, the queen is forced to capture, but again, this doesn't solve your problem of having a weak e5 pawn. If your opponent goes for something like this, you can play knight g6, bishop back, and you can just try to capture this pawn in the long run. For example, queen b6, attacking this pawn, and if he defends it properly like this, the idea is queen c7 with the idea of this, and you might have some cool ideas like this, maybe, in the future. But the main idea is we're just going to attack this pawn until it falls. Funnily enough, there's not really a good way for white to defend this pawn anymore. As you can see, black's entire plan was his pawn break over here, and by breaking the opponent's pawn chain, by forcing your opponent to take q, you get a strong advantage because then you can take advantage of the pawns that are left behind, such as this e5 pawn over here. So, as we can see, knight c6 is terrible. So, c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3, queen b6, and a more common move here instead of just bishop e2, trying to castle, is the move a3. This is because white does not really like this pressure over here, and he really wants you to capture him. Because if you capture him, guess what? This knight gets a good square on c3, with potential of going to e2 to defend the d4 pawn, and a3 has another idea. If you're playing on the white side, a3 is a very strong move because it's trying to play for b4, which forces the capture because, well, he's threatening to capture us. b4, and if we do capture us, for example, let's just say we play bishop d7, b4 captures, and we play something like knight e7. As you can see, this queen no longer pressures the b2 pawn, and this bishop has potential to go on b2, and even though it is a bad bishop, it's doing a good job of defending the weak square on d4. So, after a move like a3, one of the most common variations here is just to play, instead of bishop d7, is to play c4. But as you can see here, after c4, the pawn chain, even though we have a strong pawn chain, our opponent also has a very solid pawn chain over here. So what is black's idea over here in this position? Using the pawn break idea that I've taught you so far, I want you guys to pause your videos and think of a possible plan for black. Alright? I hope you guys paused your videos, because if you guys did, you guys can help me determine that a very simple plan here for black is just to go for moves like b5, a5, and go for b4 as a new pawn break, with the idea of if white does not capture us, for example, let's just say bishop e2, something like a5, knight d2, queen a7, castle, b5. These might not be the most optimal moves, but I'm just showing you guys what a possible plan is here. Rook e1, queen b6 with idea b5. As you can see, white's pieces, even though he has more space here and possibly more space there, his pieces are quite cramped, and there's not really much he can do to help prevent that, right? So let's say he plays like knight f1 with the idea of knight g3. We can play bishop a6, supporting this, and they play something like bishop f4. We have this b5 pawn break idea. Pawn breaks are very strong because first of all, they're very easy to find and they're not that complicated. And the idea is usually the opponent does not want to keep capturing you like this because as you can see, not only does our knight go on a good square and has potential to go to even more, as you can see this b2 pawn is quite a big weakness while our c4 pawn is a strength. But even if white does not capture in these positions, let's say they play something, oh they can't play rook c1, let's say they play queen c2, we have ideas of just capturing one of these two pawns and just creating weaknesses on a3 and c3 that we can take advantage in the future. After a move like this, we can move our knight here and we can move our knight there. And we created weaknesses in our opponent's position that we can exploit. However, just a note for you guys, you never want to play a move like b3 because if you play b3, his pawn chain is still super strong and there's no way for us to break it. That's a common mistake that I see people play, playing b3, taking advantage of the queen. But then after something like this, guess what? You have no more advantage because there's no way that you're ever taking advantage of this, and now your opponent has free reign to do whatever he wants on the opposite side of the board. We are never ever breaking this, even with sacrifices, because our opponent can just defend the pawns twice. So, as an overview, in case you guys forgot, pawn breaks are basically a pawn push that strives to break an opponent's pawn chain. It's extremely strong because once your opponent's pawn chain is broken, you can take advantage of the pawns that are left behind that are overextended in your position. If you guys don't do pawn breaks, then those pawns become strengths of your opponents, and it's not really a good way for you to take advantage of this. So, I hope you guys all got a lot from this video. I hope you guys are able to execute your own pawn breaks during your own games. And if you guys did, I hope you guys press the subscribe button for more exciting chess content just like this one. Or if you have a game to show me in which you guys successfully did your own pawn break, I'll be very happy to see it in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I hope to see you guys in a future one. This is Sean Lei, signing off.